Welcome to today's podcast on the Olympic movement and how it affects business for the Global Chamber. Today we have with us a very special guest, Bruce Furniss, among the top swimmers for the 20th century, gold medal winner, real estate mogul. He's done some amazing things, part of one of the dynamic swimming families of Orange County. Both he and his brother were extremely competitive against each other, and Bruce won the gold medal in the relay and the 200-meter freestyle in the Montreal Olympic Games, which, as we may hear from another person on this podcast list, wasn't the most successful from a business standpoint, but it was successful for Bruce and my friend Nadia Comaneci. So to both of you, it was super successful. I don't care what the business people say. In any event, Bruce, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
If
you.
you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what it was like, first of all, to be an Olympian, to actually go to Montreal, the butterflies that might be in your stomach, because we're going to have some future Olympians listen to your podcast. And then we can go into what you've done since then and how your Olympic challenges have helped you throughout your entire career. So the floor is yours.
Well, it's ironic that I competed, as you said, in 1976 in Montreal, and a few unique tidbits about those games. One is that was the first time my parents ever left California to watch me compete at a major competition. So it was, during my freshman year at USC, I forewent going to the Pan Am Games so that I could stay eligible for college, and I took a light academic load after their NCAA championships in the spring, and I moved home. And the idea was I would go to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then the rest of the week I was at home in the bed I grew up in and the food that I was used to eating, and sort of try to have a normal life during this, once in a lifetime moment. And my father, back then, before cell phones and the internet, he had to prepay his package to go to Montreal. And so every night before I'd go to bed, my father would say to me, "I'm going to the Montreal Olympics. Are you?" And he was dead serious, because he was going to go whether I made the team or not. And was fortunate enough to go. And obviously my brother was on the team with me as well. So that was a very unique experience. My brother Steve had been a member of the 72 team in Munich, was a suite mate with Mark Spitz. And if you recall, and my brother won a bronze medal in the 200 individual medley, an event, unfortunately, they didn't contest in 1976. But as you recall, the village, it had a rectangular floor plate to it, and it only had one entrance in Munich. And actually, I'm going there this September. It'll be my first trip there, but I'm really interested to go see the Olympic Village. But they had this perimeter fence on the village, and the kids didn't want to run around to the front to go through the processing. So over the course of days and weeks, they created a hole in the fence in the back of the village, and that's where a lot of the athletes would come in and out, even though they weren't supposed to, and nobody thought anything of it. And it turns out that that's where the terrorists entered the stadium. Wow. Or they entered the village that night. And obviously my brother was affected by the fact that Mark Spitz, being Jewish, he was hustled out of he said he woke up one day and the chancellor of the prime minister of Germany was in the suite getting Mark Spitz out of the room. So there was concern that maybe he was going to be threatened. So I arrive in Montreal. We had a really cool departure from New York University at Plattsburgh, where President Ford flew in and met the entire Olympic team. I got to greet him on the tarmac of the airport. And later that day, we got on about, 150 GMC vans, and we were in a caravan all the way across the border. We were met by the mounted police at the border, and we never stopped at a stoplight until we got to the village.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it was a big pronouncement when we arrived. All the other athletes were there waiting for us, and we're all excited. And We were in the very, if you look at the village in Montreal, we're at the very, I guess that would be the west side of the four wing village, and these things were stair steps. So the very top floor was very narrow, probably 2 or 3 suites up there. And I, in my haste, wanted to go get a picture of the Olympic Stadium from the top of the village. So once I got settled, I went up the elevator to the top floor, you know, somewhat oblivious to the fact that this was a different time in the world after the Munich massacre. And I show up on that floor, and there's a guy in green camouflage fatigues with an automatic weapon standing there saying, "You're not allowed on this floor." So,
Oh,
wow, what's going on? So I go down one floor, I take my picture, and I later found out, because one of our fellow swimming coaches was the swim coach for the Israeli team in
ah,
1976, and that was their floor. And they had very few athletes there. They probably had more embedded security people on their team than they did athletes. But it was an eye-opening moment for me to say, okay, here's where the sports world collided with international politics and terrorism, and I suddenly felt insignificant.
well, you were extremely significant during the swimming competition for sure. I mean, it had to be exciting to be out there. What's your favorite memory of that whole thing, or is it all just a blur?
Well, no, it's funny. I got to go to Montreal this last, after what would be, was 39 years. I get my math right. Yeah, 38 years. I went back just recently to the Olympic Stadium. My wife is from Southern Vermont, yet I had never been to Montreal with her. We went up there, and a friend of mine on my USC team had joined us, and he had arranged for, lack of a better word, a docent tour. And so I just sort of figured I'd knock on the door and walk in and look around, but
They're wonderful.
he had arranged for a guy to show us around, and he took us sort of like a backstage tour of Disneyland. I mean, he took us all the nooks and crannies of the areas that I have vivid memory of. Like, underneath the stands was a warm-up pool that we used, and I remember warming down after my race with John Neighbor, and just the two of us in that pool, all alone, with nothing but spewing of Gatorade cups throughout. And then a little further down, closer to the diving well, there's this utility room. And I remember being by myself right under the clock, with my feet on the wall, my head and back on the ground, and so relaxed that I would doze off. And, one of those situations where I doze up and I'd catch myself like, oh my gosh, I fell asleep. I'm going to miss my race. Right. And then, 3 seconds had gone off on the clock. But the distraction during that time, and I tease her all the time when I see her, Jennifer Chandler, who won the 3-meter springboard there, still as cute as a button to this day. She kept she would go out and practice in between events that were taking place in the swimming venue. And so I was in that room, and she'd come in, and then walk out. And it's like, I don't really want to be thinking about Jennifer Chandler right now, as beautiful as she is. So that's one of my vivid memories. And the other one was back then, the way in which we decided what garment or suit to wear was pretty much dictated by the club we swam for, or the college we swam for. So my college team was a Speedo team. So during the college season, I'd wear a Speedo. And my club team was an arena team. So I'd wear arena during the summer. So they're the two rivals, and I'm half the year in one and half the year in the other. So we come to the Olympics, and the decision is going to be made what suit I'm going to wear. And I had sort of felt, it would look appropriate on the relay to wear the same suit. So I agreed to wear the Speedo suit. They had bought the rights for the U.S. Swimming team. But for the individual race, it was, open season. And I pretty much had decided that I was going to wear Speedo, but in order to sort of keep the promotion people at bay, I warmed up in an arena suit. And as I'm walking off the pool deck to change into a Speedo suit, the Speedo rep is right there at the locker room entrance, and he makes some sarcastic comment about the suit I'm wearing. And little does he know, I'm going in to put his suit on. And I was so bothered by his comment that I said, screw this. I go in the locker room and I put on a dolphin suit. Now, Dolphin had never been a player in the swimwear realm at all. They might have been a little bit in the early 60s, but you recall in the mid to late 70s, they had a very popular jogging short that
Yes.
everybody was wearing.
Yeah, we're
And
both
so,
dating ourselves.
so, so they, when you're in the training camp, every day somebody sends you something, right? And a lot of this stuff is just crap that we either traded or gave away. But for whatever reason, I kept that dolphin suit and I put it in my bag and I said, there just might be a reason to wear this. So I remember going in, I said, this is the moment. I'm going to get them off my back for good and make a statement. And so I put on the dolphin suit, didn't wear very well. Today, a swimmer would never wear that garment, but I was saying, you know what, the suit does not win the race, the swimmer does, and I'm going to prove that. And I remember looking in the mirror as I tightened down the string, and I said to myself, if you lose this race by 100th of a second, you'll always wonder if it's the suit. So I wore the dolphin suit, and so after the Olympics, they would have ads in Swimming World magazine that would always tout the number of medals won in which suit, and the numbers were always one off because of me wearing that dolphin suit. And
Right.
about 6 months later, it came to Dolphin's attention finally that I had worn their suit and I got a free pair of jogging shirts out of it. So
Oh boy.
that's one of my better stories, and it gets better as I reflect on it because today, I mean, you can make a lot of money by the suit you wear. So
Exactly. That suit's probably worth a lot of money today.
yeah, well, it's been donated to the Swimming Hall of Fame. You go down there, you can see it.
Oh, that's great. Well, you are the member of what, three Hall of Fames, including our USC Trojan Hall of Fame.
Right,
So
right.
congratulations on
Thank
that.
you. Thank
Uh,
you.
it's wonderful. So tell us about, coming home from the games. Was it kind of a letdown, or did you just keep swimming and swimming for years later?
Well, the Olympics was the very first time that I ever been favored to win a race. I had trained. My training partner in Long Beach was Tim Shaw, who was the Sullivan Award winner in 1975. He was the last American to hold world records in the 2, the 4, the 8, and the 1500.
Wow.
And Tim had gotten anemia that spring and really struggled to make the team. He ended up getting a silver medal in the 400 free. And during the world trials in 75, I broke his world record and had sort of laid claim to that event for the next 4 years. But up until the Montreal Olympics, I was never the favorite. And so, I felt a little bit of that pressure. I always liked to be the hunter and not the hunted. And when I came home, obviously, suddenly I had notoriety. If it wasn't just in my little town of North Tustin, it was, certainly in Orange County and on campus at USC. And I wasn't frankly used to that. I liked my anonymity and I liked being able to just sort of blend in and be a student. When I was at USC, I was involved in Trojan Squires and Trojan Knights, and I was involved in their fraternity, and I was involved in Skull and Dagger and Blue Key, had a lot of organizations on campus. So I met a lot of people that weren't athletes, a lot of friends that weren't, and suddenly everybody knew who I was. And I wasn't used to that, to be honest. So that took a while. It calmed down after about 6 months, and things sort of got back to normal. But you have your 15 minutes of fame for a while, and it's different.
Well, that's great. So what have you done since then, business-wise?
Well, out of college, my degree was in public relations and marketing, and I did a lot of work in 80. I retired in 80. So 81, 2, 3, and 4, I worked for a lot of the sponsors of the games in 84
Okay.
that, either doing customer incentive programs or marketing and public relations work for them. And then
Yeah, we
when
learned.
that when
Let me
that
stop you
business
there. We learned about the unique methodology that the '84 games, Peter Uberoth and David Wolper came up with in terms of getting those sponsors from Rich Perlman, and who will be later in these broadcasts, and you'll hear from him. But it was interesting to say how he had laid out the foundation, and they're still using basically that same formula now again in Paris and once again for LA 28.
they are, and there's an obscure name that's been lost in that story. I'm sure Rich may have mentioned it. A guy named Bob Ronca. He was a city councilman in LA, and he was the person that really put forth the idea that you are not going to put the financial burden on the citizens of Los Angeles to host the games. That it was passed by the city council that it was going to be privately funded, and Peter Rubath had the vision and wherewithal to make that happen, and it was a game changer, and it frankly needed to happen. So the way in which I do stipulate to the fact that I think the games are the world's not one place. And so, a lot of people say, well, we should just put it in Greece forever and leave it there. And I like the fact that it moves around the world, and you can share the spirit and the traditions of the Olympic movement with people from every corner of the world. But it's expensive to do. And the only way you're going to do it is through private partnerships.
Oh, absolutely. And without that, we wouldn't have the games as we know them. And we know that, the Asian countries put a lot of their own money into it, but as soon as it moved back to the Western world, whether it be Europe or the US, there is no more money for that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
nobody thinks less of a city for not putting in money.
Right. Well, you recall in Mexico City, and I can't speak to Munich, but Mexico City and Montreal, in both those cases, they had huge labor issues, huge cost overruns. To this day, they're still paying for the cost of the 76 Olympics. So, we don't burden people in Southern California with that responsibility. And I
Right.
think that's a testimony to Peter.
It is. But to change the subject a little bit, I mean, I think you probably learned a lot about your goals and how to meet goals and things like that being an athlete. And I'm sure you somehow turned those into being a successful businessman. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that
Sure.
development
Well,
process.
when the games left Los Angeles, a lot of the business that I was working on left as well. And the company I work for, Burson Marsteller, which is a large PR firm,
Yes.
multinational PR firm, had propositioned me to move to New York to their headquarters. They had a sports and entertainment marketing division, and I just didn't want to go. And so there really wasn't a relevant purpose for me to stay. So I decided to leave, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had quite a few friends that were in the insurance game and the wealth management game and commercial real estate. So I spent some time reflecting on them. What I grew to like about what I do is I'm my own boss. I call my own shots. I eat what I kill, and so that's the good part. I mean, I have 4 children. I would seldom missed a sporting event or a school activity when they were growing up, but I paid a price for that. I took time away from work where I could be making a living. So there was always in a balancing act as a parent and a businessman. Maybe in hindsight, maybe insurance or wealth management would have been better, but once you get a certain size, it's sort of a autopilot. What I do for a living is I sell multifamily real estate, and I do have 40 years of relationships that I have, but there's not a lot of loyalty in what I do. It's usually motivated by providing the best service at the highest and achieving the highest price. And if they don't think you can do that, they're going to give the business to someone else. So but I've enjoyed what I do, and I think a lot of the things I learned as an athlete, as far as setting goals and not being afraid to stick your neck out. I mean, when you think about it, in a sport like swimming or track and field, gymnastics, when you compete on a stage by yourself and you fail to perform to your level that you think you should, you're not the only one that knows that. Everybody around you gets to watch that and see that. If a member of a basketball team or a baseball team, I sort of can blend in and hide. I mean, maybe the team didn't do well, but I don't get singled out because it's a team thing. Individual sports is a lot different. And what I do for a living today is very similar to that. A scorecard is how many transactions you make and how much money you make. So
Right. But it seems like this, to say that if you don't do well as an individual, everybody sees it. But in your case, you did amazing, and everybody saw it. And I think that lends to your credibility and your dedication. I mean, you must have worked tirelessly in the pool day after day after day to get those achievements.
Well, I tell my kids all the time that, it's consistency over time, and a little thing perfected over time can become a really important thing, or a little thing missed over time can become a really big problem. And so I was really lucky to be around two important things. Or around people that could communicate to me in a way to effectuate the technique that I needed to deploy. By no means am I a big person. I'm 6 foot. Today, I would be very challenged to be very competitive as a swimmer in my events. Most guys are probably 6'5" or taller. And, my skill was to master technique and to have better skill and technique at what I did, and have, put out less effort and more efficiency. Uh, and the other thing is I was around people that were competitive, that like to race. Swimming can be such a monotonous, boring sport if you just follow the black line up and down. And, to be able to equate effort to time in practice so that you're translating it to how that'll affect a race. And just yesterday, Larson Jensen, who was an SC swimmer, he won the silver medal in 1500, I believe in 2008, and still the American record holder. He posted a thing on LinkedIn about 100 100s on a minute. And he gave sort of a narrative of this set that we would do. And we would do it once a year on New Year's Day. And literally, you'd swim 4 laps, 400 yards. You'd probably come in about 57, 58, enough to grab the wall, catch a breath, and push off and do it again. It's 10,000 meters that way. And you do it in a minute, you do it in an hour and 40 minutes.
Wow.
And it's pretty hard. If you extend yourself a little bit too much in the beginning, you're going to pay for it at the end. And it's one of those things where you're focused on just conquering, the goal and saying, I want to complete this. And it was cool to see him post that, because a lot of people chimed in. Bobby Hackett chimed in, and everybody had done that set and reflected fondly on it, even though we dreaded it back in the day.
Of course.
So,
So, what advice would you give to a young athlete or an old athlete who might be attending the game, who might be participating in the games for the first time?
Probably the hardest thing to do, which frankly I didn't do enough of, is to savor the moment. I was watching a clip on John Wooden the other day, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he basically said, yesterday is gone and tomorrow is yet to come. Focus on today. And I think so much of our life is spent, with regret of what we didn't do in the past, or focused on what we want to do in the future, and we just don't stay where we are.
Or focusing on these things.
Yeah. And going back to Montreal last year, it gave me time to sort of connect some of those moments and those neurons that were bouncing around that I didn't know I still had. And I would just say, suck it in, take as much of it in as you can, because, regardless if you win a medal, regardless if you win a gold medal, regardless if you make a final, regardless if you get disqualified, whatever happens, they can never take away that experience. You're in the arena and you're an Olympian, and that will be with you the rest of your life. And it's a marvelous thing. And I've met so many interesting people. I'm in a very exclusive club of people that I can navigate in and always be accepted. So it's kind of cool.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. I know the audience will appreciate it, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Nice to talk to you too,
All right.
Casey. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.